I'm Kerry Rowett, and this is the Align and Attract podcast, helping you to create your version of an aligned business. Let's dive into today's episode. Tell your brand stories with heart with Jessamyn McLaughlin. Welcome to the podcast, Jessamyn.
Thanks, Kerry. Excited to be here.
And so Jessamyn is the owner of Felt, which is a digital content agency. And Jessamyn is a part of my mastermind, and she's based in Adelaide, which is so unusual for me to get to work with somebody who is actually in South Australia. I'm asked all the time, most of your clients in South Australia? And I always say, no, hardly any, and sometimes none. But right now I do get to work with someone from South Australia, which is so exciting. And so, Jessamyn, to kick us off, I would love you to share the synchronistic way that our paths initially crossed.
Well, I was running a wine brand in the Adelaide Hills, their feed, and as part of a maternity field contract for them, actually. And they do weddings. They're, kind of an incredible place, and they do weddings. And you got married there. And so, and because we have a very high community management element to how we run feeds, we're very invested in what's going on in the business, all the communications, all the tags and shares. And so, of course, we noticed you, and your wedding was quirky because you did not wear a traditional wedding dress, and you just looked like lit up. And so we really noted your wedding. And then randomly, I kept seeing you in other places, in other feeds I followed, Denise Duffield-Thomas, Claire Wood. It kept happening, and both of whom I've worked with, in the past as well. It just kept happening to the point where I took, the nudge and followed you and started sort of engaging with you. And I had been looking for something, so started to sort of take note of what you were doing.
Yes. And not long after that, you joined my mastermind. So please tell us the story of your business. So you own a digital content agency. I know that you were looking for a change or an evolution when our paths crossed, and that's why you joined my mastermind. But please tell me, how did your business start? And you've been in this space for 20 years. So of course, there are going to have been changes along the way. Bring us into your story.
So I'm a wine marketer by official trade, by studious means, and my background's in the wine industry. And when my first son was born, I think like a lot of women of my age and era, that I had to go back to work full time, that I had to keep doing that for two reasons. One, my family needed money. Two, I had my own inner drive to get somewhere, to be successful, to do whatever it was that, I felt I should do. And I went back to work full time as a brand manager in the wine industry when my baby was 11 months old. And the end of that year, I actually lost our second son in utero at 5 months. And I think as a result, I learnt kind of in a roundabout way, to what I needed to value at that point in my children and my life. And perhaps if I hadn't had that experience, it might have taken my children growing up for me to really reflect on that, because I'm a very driven person. And I think that probably put a line in the sand for me and really showed me in full technicolor that nothing mattered more than being present for my child at that point in his life, that money wasn't really the primary concern. We would make do, we would live with less. What mattered was that I was present, because that really, really was something on the back of the loss of Ewan that that was a great pain for me, that I hadn't been. So from that point onwards, I didn't stop working, like you just don't. I just did little things, like I worked for friends. I actually started an alternative baked goods business, which was my first business, with my aunt in Sydney. We wholesaled into health food and organic stores. But that's hard work, but not a lot of income. And my youngest son was born in that time, and that meant that, we just couldn't sustain it. I couldn't sustain it. So when we moved to Adelaide in 2013, I looked around for work, but my youngest son at that point is very allergic and asthmatic and also has ADHD. So he was quite a lot of work at that point. And I just felt I was going to be the person sick or having sick days all the time and not turning up to work, and I wouldn't be able to sustain a job. So I thought, well, I'm going to use the tools I have, which is marketing. And I had learnt social media in one of those part-time jobs as marketing manager at the Lord Nelson in Sydney. I had been forced to learn social media in that role because it was sort of the dawn of social media for business. Craft beer was kind of one of the early adopters of it, as were a lot of the food and sort of artisan beverage industries. And I was not interested, but I had to learn because it was a small business. There was no one else to do it. And I had learned that narrative-driven social media really cut through and had incredible impact in a world that was full of sales-driven social media. And when I say impact, I don't mean like great follower growth or virality or popularity in those very traditional capitalist metrics of success. I mean, it started to connect and build really incredibly connected and real community. And so events sold out and the business started to boom. It was top of mind again in a busy world where it had been around for a long time and maybe it's sort of gone down the list for people. And so I'd learned this way and I thought, well, I've got these tools. I'll just take them to market here in Adelaide, thinking I'd look after pubs. And the wine industry came calling very quickly. And the wine industry came calling not for marketing, but for social media support and narrative-driven, organic storytelling. Social media from someone who knew the nuances and intricacies of the industry because, it has its complexities and its annual cycles. And that's where my business really it started very organically, but there was no great purpose in it. It was about flexibility for Cal and Bryn at that point and to put a bit of money in the pot, in those early years of their life.
Yes, amazing. And so over time grew into more of an agency model. And then, like so many people, having built a successful business, like you said, it wasn't necessarily a purpose-driven business for you. And so what changed for you that had you starting to seek something more for yourself?
I think my children getting older for a start was part of that. My husband, it was such a nice transition with age where he was able to work a bit less and parent a bit more as they sort of started to head into the early teens or late, tweens, early teens. And so that I think allowed me headspace. And then I think the Ewan experience really made me feel very passionate about workplaces that were flexible and supportive and that allowed humans to be humans in their life, so that whatever happened, they were able to be a human still and live their life, that it wasn't this great division between home and work. And I started to employ women in particular, but I had boys too who worked for me. I'm very much like human, not necessarily just women, but mostly it's been women and mothers who it has been my great honor to be able to support them through that and be able to go, man, of course you work from home today if your kid's sick, or of course, it's just a non-issue. And for those women to be incredibly committed workers as a result, I think when you treat humans like humans, they step up to the plate in the same way for the business. And I started to sort of see that there was this need for this in the community and also this groundswell of business doing things this way. And that this is, I know in my deep intuitive heart is what the world needs. It needs more of us. It needs a groundswell and a critical mass of us in the world to start to tip the scales from this world of more, more, more to one of sustainability and care and humanity. And then I also always saw that business like sort of grossly overestimated the need to sell on their comms channels and greatly underestimated the power of their stories and what beautiful things they had to tell people that would connect. And ultimately, what I say is connect and convert. And that, you know, they weren't really, they were still, even today, I get it, there's a very what we do narrative in business storytelling and not so much how and why we do it. And so it started to feel a little more purpose driven as I think I had some more headspace to see that I did have kind of a unique corner of this world that was very, very much a difference for us. And that we were here to hold space for business to tell their stories with heart, to connect with people, and to sort of show them a way that felt good and doable, consistently doable for them to do that. And over the last few years, that's gotten very crystal clear and ultimately completely crystal clear in the last 6 months with you in this mastermind.
Oh, I'm so excited to dive into this bit because up until this point, you were doing this work for brands, and I would imagine primarily relatively substantial brands who are positioned to be able to hire an agency. And then there was something else that was calling you and being called out of you at this time that our crossed paths. And so, what is it that you were starting to get called into? And then, what was it that had you then decide to join my mastermind as a way to help you to actualize that?
So I had a product or an offer that was sitting in my brain for a couple of years, but it got very, very clear about a year before I came to you. And it sat there and sat there and sat there. I've been digital coaching, one-to-one coaching for about 6 years. And what started as what I thought would be very strategic very quickly became very intuitive and what people liked, even the boys. And I always say the boys, like we laugh, but even the boys would love the sort of intuitive, reflective practice that I built into our sessions, which was using things like my own intention cards I created, which again just downloaded because I just kind of heard these words that businesses running social media and trying to tell their stories needed to hear, and mindful marks and visualization and, you know, nurturing practice, lots of nurturing practice. And so then this, I guess, group offer was just then puttering away in my head for a couple of years. But as I came to you, what I really was doing was I was opening and accepting a side of myself I had hidden for a long time, which was my very intuitive side. I have had a very spiritual upbringing. I was Rudolf Steiner educated, and my mother was an academic in ancient religions and a witch. So I was exposed to a lot of very alternative practice growing up and ritualistic practice. You know, even Steiner is very ritualistic. We acknowledge a lot of the seasons and things like that. But I couldn't see a place for that in my business, so I hid it. And I think probably if I'm truly reflecting, I saw my mother probably be ridiculed a lot. And, you know, that was, I would say, a large part of why I didn't open to it. But if you ask my friends, they would all say I'm kind of the spiritual one, but I hid it in my business. And it started to feel really wrong to do that. It started to feel really right to follow crumbs along a path that was leading me into what I am now, where I am now at, which I feel sort of supercharged experience of downloading my intuition. And I felt that if I was going to join with a group or a coach, I needed to be with someone who both had that strategic practice, because that's what I knew I needed from an accountability perspective, but someone who was going to hold space for me in this as well, that was going to understand, that wasn't going to think I was ridiculous and perhaps ridicule me, a space that was going to feel safe for me to continue to unpack this side, which I had started a little bit last year before I saw you, by doing a tarot card course with a mentor of mine. But I was just at the start, and really, I think what it did definitely confirm for me was that I needed more of that. And that's definitely why your mastermind was attractive to me at the time.
Yes, and what I'm hearing in this is so much evolution in your identity and greater acceptance of who you really are, and being able to integrate that so that you're able to express it in a really coherent way without feeling excessively vulnerable or messy or fragmented, or like I'm going to be ridiculed or it's going to feel weird. And I think that's so powerful, isn't it? When we get to also have that sense of stability as we're bringing forth what are our truest gifts. So I've definitely seen that in you. It's been such a beautiful journey so far. And so please bring us into more of this story. Like, what have you actually created and brought to life in this space?
So I think I joined you in October, and I think by like mid-November, I'd downloaded the entire thing. I think I shared a photo at one point at my kitchen sink at 5 a.m. in my pajamas with my hands in the dishes. And I just literally downloaded this whole thing. It was just like, it was like the door was sort of, kind of edging in the breeze. And I joined your mastermind, and it just flew open. And it was so fast. It was a lot, actually. If I think back, I think, wow, if that happens again, I'll be a bit more prepared. But it was like I had a direct conduit to spirit, and it was intense, and it just all downloaded. So this little thing that had been puttering away in the back of my head became the Heartfelt Story Circle, which is a membership for business to support them to tell their stories and to market with authenticity, wisdom, well-being, and heart. And it's 12 months. It's a 12-month membership. So the idea is that they're going to look back at the end of 12 months, and the transformation is probably going to blow them away, actually. But we can break it down into lovely little consumable steps month by month, because the one thing that has always connected everyone I've ever worked with is they're deeply heart-led, but they're also quite vulnerable in this space. And in fact, they're often extremely highly accomplished people who have, hit the top echelons in their careers or in their industries. They're actually incredibly wise. But when they come here, they feel not enough, and they feel, that they're extremely lacking, and they overthink everything. And so what I really wanted to do was create this safe space where they could realize what beautiful stories they have to tell, and how they can tell them in ways that are impactful and connection driven, and how they can start to feel good and kind of nervous system calm about doing that. And that's really what it is. It's come to the world so fast. And it was launched by December. It was, sold through by December 30, and the first call schedule started in February.
What an incredible evolution. And I think what this shows is how ready you were, and you were just waiting for those right conditions to arrive. And when you said those downloads came through, that was very intentional, because inside the mastermind, we have what I call the body of work curriculum. And within that, you have an opportunity to name exactly what it is that you are wanting to download and the characteristics of that. So for example, it is a group program. It's going to help people to change their lives, or whatever you are desiring for this particular iteration of your work to be. And then there is a video where we help you to activate the download energetically and intuitively, and then away you go. And so, as you shared, you were then just receiving non-stop downloads. And I do say, actually, within that curriculum, you can also name how quickly you want the downloads to come. Because sometimes I've had this experience too. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. This is a full-time job, writing down everything that is coming to me.
Yeah, I think though, because I think I'd been puttering, and then when we first talked, I was just like, once I was there, I was like, we're doing this. This is December, I'm done. Because also what I had come to was, anyone that runs a digital content agency that has a strong community management element to it understands it's intense and complex and full work. Your workload is full all the time. And I had come to the point where I went, I know I need to turn the corner a bit with my business. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, although at times I did feel like that, but I don't. I love my clients. I have wonderful, very long-term relationships with them, but I want to not need another 10 of them or another 20 of them. I want to need 8 to 10, which is really unusual for a digital content agency. And I want the rest of my income to come from digital coaching and this membership. And so not only do I feel like I'm doing my purpose work, I feel like I'm turning the business into, something that works for me and my nervous system a bit better. And memberships, I'm loving it. Like some people say, I hate running memberships, but I'm a nurturer. So it's a really natural place for me. I love it. I love being in there with their questions. I love holding space for them and helping them work through things and see their own solution. I love all of it. It's just completely aligned to my energy system is running a membership.
So incredible. And so the doors are open. I want you to tell us about that. And when people join, like what can they actually expect from the circle?
So we do 2 calls each month. At the top of every month, we do a planning call. So the idea is to really get them thinking like a bit like a social media manager, thinking ahead. Like even for instance, in May, thinking ahead to the fact that the first weekend in June is the long weekend. And that's a real marketing manager, planning manager, social media manager way to think. You're always thinking ahead, looking ahead. And so we go through the month week by week. We go through all the things they could talk about or honor or acknowledge. We talk about seasonality and the impact of that in a feed and in how that can connect with people. And then we talk about, latest trends and updates and good need to knows for them, things that they could try or have a play with. And basically everything that's going in the social media world and in the world as well, and how that energetically could tap in to their narrative for the month. But on top of that, what we also layer is energetic stuff. So we do visualization and really tap into what I call it is building a bridge between what's in their heart and what's on the page. So it starts to really speak their truth and starts to speak their truth in a way that feels good and natural for them, because it's actually their truth. It's not some should they're ticking off. It's not some you must do. It's actually doing it their way. And that seems to be, we're 5 months in. And I think that seems to be one of the revelations they're already having, that I feel like it's okay. I feel so much calmer about doing this. And also this concept of looking forward is, you might do it for other elements of your business, but perhaps you've forgotten to do it in this area because you're doing it ad hoc or, on the spot. And that's not to say that ad hoc and on the spot aren't part of the mix, but it's really lovely to have a bit of a framework and to think it through every month. And then the second call is a wellbeing check-in. So we do Q&As. So they come to the Zoom room with whatever question they might have. They might have been struggling with something in stories or struggling with how to think through LinkedIn. So that comes to the table. We have guests, wellbeing sort of leaning guests, and we have visualization. And I also do card readings. So sometimes I draw a card for every call, and it helps me understand. And that, of course, cards, once you start to work with them, are unbelievable conduits of universal messages. And every time the cards sort of blow my mind and then blow their mind. But sometimes it's not just one card. There's been times when I've gone, guys, I've got to do a reading because the one card just didn't make sense. So you need to hear the full story today. So it's very, very supportive of their well-being and supportive of their mindset around this, as well as super practical and strategic is the whole sort of vibe of it. And then on top of that, we have a WhatsApp chat, which they can pop into at any point with questions and queries. And we pop in, as social media changes happen, which they do, like every week, every day, we will pop in with the information as it happens and whether they should worry about it or what they could try, to adopt. But super supportive, super nurturing, and but practical and strategic too.
Yes, I absolutely love that. And we can hear how unique this offering is and how grounded it is as well. And the way you've been able to blend what was a really solid, established skill set and to be able to translate that for a new audience and bring more people into your world at a much lower and more accessible price point. But then you've also been able to bring in more of you and your intuition and well-being practices and that ability to tap into the group and their needs and to read the energy and read the space. So you're really giving yourself that opportunity to play with that and to be all of you. So that's what I'm really hearing. And that is so incredibly powerful. I know for everyone listening, like so often, this is the type of thing that we really desire is to use our skill set, but to do it in a way that is even more authentically ourselves. And also, like in this example, what you're really seeking is something that was more scalable. So I hope you go check out the circle if this is really resonating for you. So we've spoken about how you've used the mastermind to bring the circle to life and to work through the steps. But I wonder if you could share just a couple of like the shifts and changes that you've observed within yourself along the way as a result of some of the work that we've been doing in the mastermind and our calls and the audios and the videos and so on.
Look, I think in those early calls, the shifts were incredible. Building the structure of your business. I love that call. I go back to it a lot, and my business is so clear. It's a terrace house in Paddington in Sydney. It's absolutely beautiful. I can see all the women, and when the women in my group, it is just women at the moment, but I would love men as well. But the women in my group, I can see them in this house now. They love being together. Like if I got them in together in person, the bubbles would be flowing and the chats would be loud and the tarot cards would be out. It would be everything. So that's what really came from that business structure. But to go back and re-listen to it and get new layers is so powerful. And I think the support, strategically is incredible as well. In that, sometimes I can just come with a really basic strategic problem, whether it's pricing or, I think one of the big changes we implemented on the back of this was team productivity. And I know it seems insane, but I hadn't implemented a team productivity tool yet. I just hadn't got my head around it. And at the end of last year, we redistributed the tasks in Felt, and we started this year with the same amount of work, but the business felt completely different. And I have had a lot less social media management tasks to do than I've ever, well, than that I've had in 10 years at least, or nearly 10 years. And it's really, that's been great, just having that sounding board. But I also, when I came to you, I also craved the community. I wanted peers because I think the incredible thing about a community is its reflect, and you always hear yourself in other people's stories. And you think, this is what I say to my people too, you think you're alone, but you're not. You're reflected in so many people. In fact, probably everyone, if they really were honest and said what was in their head and their heart. But you're definitely reflected in people that are attracted to the same things, and I think it's so comforting to read the stories or hear the stories of the other people in the group, because so often It's stuff you're going through or stuff you've been through or stuff you're going to go through. And it's, that's been a great, great part of it. And then the energetic support is what I wanted more than anything. And it's outstanding, to come to you and with genuine energetic issues or emotional, psychological issues and be given tools that I was just saying, I was listening to one this morning. You created a little, I guess you call it a visualization, for me around feeling like, completely overwhelmed and stressed out. And I had forgotten about it because it was about a month ago, and I felt very, very stressed out in the last 24 hours again. And I've just been listening to it again. And it's just a great tool to bring me back kind of down to earth and to regulate my nervous system a bit. That support's been great. I really appreciate that. It feels like I can feel the support. I appreciate knowing that the Slack channel is there to check in with, and I look forward to the calls. I like to make most of them. I can't always make all of them, but I like to make most of them. I really look forward to them and hearing everyone's story and hearing how people are going through the same stuff. But the energetic downloads as well are, the insight into myself has been pretty powerful, actually. And some of the most powerful stuff I've had. So for the Heartfelt Story Circle, we did a visualization around our offer, and I saw a Christian Sacred Heart card, which I don't know what that looks like necessarily. No, it's not something I carry. I'm actually not a christened person, so I don't, necessarily identify, but it was so strong to me. The visual was so strong in our visualization that I went and then created the whole brand on the back of that for the Heartfelt Story Circle. But what it also has affirmed for me is that what I'm doing, and I can see this now in the world, is I'm doing sacred heart work. And as part of that's my big job. And there are a lot of people in the world doing it. I can see that now. Once there are people probably doing, there would be people doing lots of different important work. But for what I do, I know that's the world, the sphere I'm in, is Sacred Heart is giving people the space to connect back to their heart and really feel like they're able to be themselves. And that came through that visualization, so you created some sort of powerful space and conduits too. And I love that about this.
Gosh, what incredible words. Thank you. And so a couple of those calls that you referenced, they are business energetics calls that we've done in the mastermind. And so when you join the mastermind, you get to access these calls where we were setting up your own energetic container for yourself and an energetic container for your business. And within that, you're actually defining that structure. So as you said, yours is a terrace house in Paddington, and other people have got entirely different structures that make sense for them within their business. And so many people say they do go back to that call because it enables them to continue to evolve that space and make sure it's functioning for them as the business owner. And then there was a separate business energetics call on your offer. And you've shared how you use that to set up your own. And then outside of that, I've actually set up the energetics of the space so that when people come into the mastermind, they are energetically supported by the mastermind space. So there's all these layers of these energetics pieces that you are tapping into within the mastermind, which ultimately have you feeling very held, very supported. And then you get that one-to-one support as well in Slack. So I loved hearing about that richness of your experience. And I'm so excited because you're in for your second 6-month period now. And this is really beautiful. I know that this is something you love to do. It's something I love to do, is to work with people over time. And then you get to see like these layers of their experience and their evolution and what they're then able to create. So as we finish up, Jessamyn, could you let people know where they can find you and how they can join the circle as well?
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Felt Brand Stories, And my website is feltbrandstories.com. And yes, the circle is actually, I am launching it as of this week, which is the end of May, an end of financial year special, which is 12 months for the cost of 10, so a payment plan, or an even sharper price if you pay up front. And it's easy to join. It's just a one-click on the Heartfelt Story Circle page on my website, and you're in. And the minute you're in, just like with yours, you have access to the portal with all the previous calls. There's lots of bonus calls. This month, I'm doing a bonus call just on LinkedIn. Last 2 months ago, I did a bonus call on Reels. I add in extra things, and also according to what the group is really wanting or needing. And yeah, you get all the visualizations and everything as well. So it's up to June 30. We'll have that end of financial year special available.
What perfect timing. I hope you'll go and join, because what an incredible experience that you have created. I hope you have absolutely loved this conversation. Please do jump across to Instagram. You can share with me at Kerry Rowett and with Jessamyn at Felt Brand Stories. We'd love to hear your takeaways, and if you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with a friend, and of course subscribe to the podcast so you can hear future conversations. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you next time.